Hi, everybody. I'm Donna Andersen, host of True Lovefraud Stories, and today I'm speaking with Brad Robinson, a licensed private investigator with the Millennium Group. In our story about Carlo John Giovanni Malozzi, multiple women that he targeted conducted background checks on him, which came back with no derogatory information. In fact, the reports had hardly any information at all. How can this happen? That's what I wanted to ask Brad. Here's our conversation. First of all, Brad, can you briefly describe your agency and the services that you offer to clients?
The Millennium Group, it's a full-service private investigations agency. It's staffed by former federal agents. We specialize in infidelity and fraud investigations. Our headquarters is in Florida, but we work in all 50 states and also internationally.
What is your personal background?
I'm an ex-CIA operative. I was posted undercover overseas for 11 years before moving back to the U.S. to open this agency with some former colleagues of mine.
It seems that these days, as soon as people meet a potential romantic partner, they do a background search. Why do you think that is?
People are less trusting these days than they were 20 years ago, and with good reason. There are more scammers, fraudsters, and wackos out there than ever before. It's certainly a good idea to get some information on a new romantic interest, but it's also important to keep in mind that not all background searches are created equal, and if you rely on a crappy one, which most of them are, you're going to get crappy results. That false sense of confidence that gives you can actually be worse than not checking out his background at all.
Do you think it's a good idea, then, to go ahead and do a background check?
Let me tell you what the positive result could be, and then I'll talk a little bit, if you want, about what the negatives are in terms of these online options.
Okay.
The information you get from one of these sites, and obviously I'm biased because I do this for a living, but in all honesty, a lot of our clients will come to us with a printout of one of these things they got online, and obviously they're not happy with the results, or they accepted the results at first, and then the person did something that made them realize that the report they had gotten online was wrong or had gaps or whatever. So they'll actually physically walk that into our office and say, look, I did my own background search. Here it is on this person. Can you do a better job than this? So I see these reports, and I see how bad they are. Obviously, some are worse than others, but in general, there's just, people are kidding themselves if they think that there's any one public site or location or database or public record site that's going to give them anything close to an accurate, complete snapshot of the person that they're trying to look into. That's not to say that, and again, I'm focusing on the positive here first. Doesn't sound like it. The positive is that you can run one of these reports. They'll be fairly inexpensive. They usually are. I mean, that's the lure, is you say, well, what the heck? It's only $5.99. And some of that information might be correct. The problem is a lot of that information is going to be either completely wrong, or it's going to apply to someone with that same name. In other words, you're searching, you want to find out what's going on with Brad Robinson, so you search Brad Robinson. You get some records back. Some of those might be me, the Brad Robinson you're talking to right now. Some of them might be a completely different Brad Robinson who I've never met before and never heard of, but you're not going to know that. You're just going to, and especially if it's the first one of these you've run, or anybody that doesn't do this for a living, they'll say, well, it looks like my guy was arrested 17 times in Colorado for child molesting, and then they confront that person with their so-called background search, and the person says, I've never even been to Colorado. So it's obviously a different person. So you're going to get either missing information, stuff that these cheapy databases don't include in their results, because they're doing it for $4.99. They can't afford to be complete and accurate. Or because they're trying to bundle a bunch of stuff together that they can pass off as a report, it's going to, as I said, apply to someone that may have the same or similar name to your subject, but has no connection to your subject. So it's giving you bad information in that sense. And then you're also going to have huge gaps where things they just don't have the capacity to look at, either because it's not public information. Essentially what these checkemout.net databases are doing is they're mining public information sites. They don't want to pay for the information because that's more expensive, but there's a lot of information you can get out there on public record sites for free. So they'll snatch that up here and there, and they'll call it a report. But again, because they're doing it so cheaply and so haphazardly, the results reflect that shoddiness. So people get a report that, again, may have some accurate info in there. You shouldn't necessarily assume that it's all wrong. The problem comes when you assume that it's all correct. And as I said, often it's wrong. And just as bad is the gaps that it leaves. In other words, if it doesn't mention the person's had 3 bankruptcies, and that's something that you might consider important in a future spouse. Well, it's under bankruptcies. It says 0 because they didn't find them, because they didn't look well enough. So you say, well, at least he's got a good financial history. Well, there's that false sense of confidence you get from a bad report, because the gaps can be misconstrued to be indicators of innocence on the part of the subject, when really it's just an indicator that the report is not well done.
So if that was the good news, what's the bad news?
I didn't do a very good job of differentiating, but the bad news I was going to mention is that a lot of these sites it's not just that you pay your little bit of money and look at the report, and if you're, as I said, if you're wise enough to take it with a big grain of salt, maybe it's not going to do too much harm. You're not going to confront the person with it. You just want to look at it and see if there's anything there that immediately strikes you, but you understand that report is nowhere near complete. But if you do that and you pay your money, because these sites all try to lure you in with free this and free that, and then at some point it's going to say, well, for the complete report, you need to pull out your credit card. And a lot of people end up doing that. That's why these sites are able to stay in business, because they can send, if you sell 1 million reports a month for $1.99, even if all the customers are mad at you and never come back again, you don't get any repeat business. But that's okay, because there'll be another 1 million suckers next month that'll put down their credit card for a couple of bucks and get a horrible report. The problem there comes with some of these are not just bad reporting sites; they're actual scams. And I know you're an expert on frauds, Donna, so you're probably aware of this. Some of these sites are just trying to lure people in to get their personal information and their credit card information. So if they're only charging a little bit for a report, it's because they're able to resell that information on you and your credit card to someone who's into identity theft and credit card fraud and all that kind of thing. And next thing you know, there's your card's been maxed out by someone in Russia or Pakistan, and you're able to trace, or your bank is able to trace it back to that background search site that you gave your credit card info to naively, and thought, what harm could it be for just a couple of bucks? And that it can be that kind of harm. A little bit less insidious than that, for those that think that that's too much of a stretch to believe that happens, which I assure you it does. These sites are also very good at, and I know this not because I've fallen into the trap, but because a lot of our clients do before they come to us, as I mentioned. You put down your credit card for what seems like a very reasonable small amount to get this one report. What you don't realize, because you, like most of us, you don't read all the fine print, is that you've just signed up for a subscription. Mm-hmm. So what happens is your card gets dinged the next month, and you eventually say, hey, I didn't order that. And the next month, and you go back to that website trying to figure out how to cancel your subscription, and there's no contact information, or if there's a phone number, no one answers that phone number. So now 6 months down the road, instead of paying $5.99, you've paid 6 times $5.99, and it's starting to get on your nerves, and you can't figure out how to cancel your subscription with this company, and that's the way that they make their money. So there's a number of different ways it can sort of turn on you.
One of the stories on our True Lovefraud Stories podcast involves a guy whom multiple women alleged defrauded them. At least 2 of the victims did background checks, but the guy had given them a variation of his name, so they found no derogatory information. If you don't have the correct name, can you investigate someone?
You really can't if all you have to work with is a name, or worse yet, a name variation. And to that, I would add, it's different if a name variation sort of suggests that it's a variation of the person's legitimate legal name. If I'm Bradley Robinson, but I tell you I'm Brad Robinson, that's not a big deal. But if I'm Brad Robinson and I tell you that I'm Bud Robinson or Bucky Robinson or something that I made up, or my childhood nickname or something like that, that's going to make things even worse. But even if all you have to go on is a completely accurate first and last name, unless it's quite uncommon, it's going to be a challenge. When I say a challenge, I mean almost impossible for an amateur, but even for us, that's a challenge. If someone calls us and says, look, I want you to do a background search on John Smith, there are something like 335 million people in the U.S. now, and truly unique names are pretty uncommon. Even with our excellent professional databases, we can't accurately investigate someone if all we have is a wrong name, and that does happen. And frankly, neither can the FBI or Interpol or anyone else. If you're starting with, in the government, they say garbage in, garbage out, meaning if you're starting with wrong information, the results you're going to get are obviously going to be wrong as well. When we do ours, when we do our background searches, we always ask the client for other what we call personal identifiers. And generally our clients, even the ones who initially say, all I know is their name, usually know more than they realize. These useful personal identifiers, apart from the subject's name, of course, include date of birth or age range. You could say, I think he's between 30 and 40, a phone number, email address, current home address or city or state, past addresses. If he says, I used to live in Eugene, Oregon, that even if it was 10 years ago, that's something that we can put into our databases that allow us to try to differentiate multiple subjects with the same name. License plate numbers. We did one a couple of weeks ago where the person said, all I have is this picture of him standing behind his car. Well, there was his license plate number, so we ran that number, and we were able to figure out that this guy had given her a wrong name just based on that license plate number. The names of relatives can be helpful to us. If someone's saying, even if he said that my mom's name is Gertrude, then we know we're looking for a John Smith whose mother is Gertrude, so that helps us in our search. So, as I said, generally, even the people that think that all they have is a name, there's other stuff that they know about the person that won't necessarily help them, because these cheapy online databases don't allow you to put in things like license plate numbers or names of relatives or some of these other things we're talking about, which is one of the reasons that makes their results so shoddy, is because if all you can put in is a name, and maybe even if it's a completely accurate name, and maybe a state, sometimes they'll let you narrow it down by state, it's a big country, a lot of people out there. I mean, even my name, I've never met another Brad Robinson, but I was surprised to find out that there are a couple of hundred Brad Robinsons in the United States.
The background reports that these women did came back with very little information. Is that in itself a red flag?
I would say yes and no. A person who was born or raised in the United States and is older than a teenager should have a pretty lengthy paper trail. I keep referring back to this, but I'm talking about what we can find, what a professional could find. not necessarily what one could find by themselves online. But if, as we talked about before, if you're using the wrong info, like an alias name, or you're using a lousy online database, you're going to get lousy results. So it could mean that they're hiding something. It could mean that you're just not looking the right way. In other words, you're using a bad source. So it could be a potential red flag, or it could be that they're being 100% honest, but without the resources to look into it properly, you're getting what looks like a warning sign. It would be rare. Again, let's talk about the results that a professional can put out. For a professional private investigator who has access to a number of specialized databases that the public does not, to search for someone, again, someone who's not 15 years old and someone who didn't just move to this country 2 months ago. Adults in the U.S. these days tend to have quite a lengthy digital footprint, and we're able to find a lot of that.
What should a background check show?
A couple, 3 pages. That would be a very unusually sparse report. On average, I would say our reports, these are background searches now, run in the 20, 25-page range, and some are more than 50 pages. So it's going to depend on the person, but I can give you an idea of some of the headings that we're searching, and not everybody's going to have, if I'm searching for the aircraft that you owned and you've never owned an aircraft, then obviously that one's going to come back, no records found. But to give you an idea that of what our very comprehensive, in fact, we even call it a comprehensive background search, what our reports include in terms of headings, I can run through a few of them for you. We're searching for emails, phone numbers, landline phone numbers, cell phone numbers, current address, past addresses, relatives, associates, neighbors, birth records, divorce records, marriage records, property ownership, vehicle ownership, watercraft, aircraft, corporate records, employment history, nationwide criminal history. That's important, that we're not just searching for the city and state that they live in now. We're searching all 50 states, which we're able to do, which that's not something that you can do on your own. Arrest records, people can get arrested but not have a criminal history if the arrest was not followed through on. But it might be interesting to know that someone was arrested 4 or 5 times, even if there were no convictions. Sex offender records, national wants and warrants, traffic records, bankruptcy records, tax liens, judgments, evictions, foreclosures, professional licenses, firearm licenses. That gives you an idea of what one of our reports could look like.
Do you pick up anything about military service?
No, that's not. We can search that as a specialty type thing, but that's not something that automatically gets included.
So it's possible if somebody wants it.
Yes.
Is it easy for a con artist to get a fake ID?
Yes, these days it's quite easy. You can even order them online, and they're surprisingly convincing in some cases. 2 exceptions would be state-issued driver's licenses, especially the ones with holograms, as most of them have now, or passports. But a lot of these fraudsters, scammers, end up using a fake university ID showing they're a student, or gym membership or something like that. That's easier to fake and harder to corroborate.
How often do clients ask you to investigate romantic partners or spouses?
Quite often. These investigations are usually a combination of the background search we were discussing, along with social media scan, asset search, surveillance is very important, and often some other techniques.
what can you discover in a social media search?
One thing that comes up a lot is other relationships. Something that won't show up even in a database search is who else they're talking to. What other men or women are they flirting with or exchanging photos with, that kind of thing.
And what can you discover in a financial assets search?
Our background search does cover, as I noted earlier, some financial asset type information, which I think is important. A lot of times we'll have clients who'll say, all I want is a criminal background search, and we can do that. But I'll say, let me ask you this. If this person that you're interested in and curious about has numerous bankruptcies and liens and judgments and foreclosures and repossessions against them, would that be of any interest to you at all? And they usually say, well, yeah, actually it would. Well, now we're talking about an asset search. And we do standalone asset searches which get into more depth from an asset perspective than even our comprehensive background search does. But the asset searches could include things like bank accounts, including balances, brokerage accounts, including balances, insurance policies, annuities, safe deposit boxes. We already talked about real estate properties, which is nice to know, vehicles, watercraft. So these are all things that give you, if someone's pretending to be very well off, which a lot of people do online, exaggerate that, and the asset search suggests, even if you're not looking for a millionaire, if someone claims that they're quite successful in their business, and then we find out that their business is very new and still struggling, and their bank account is minimal at best, then you have to sort of take into consideration that untruth with other things that they've told you, because clearly they're not being entirely upfront with you.
We talked earlier about the fact that some people are not giving their real names. So how can people be sure that they have somebody's real name?
The best way, I suppose, is to have a professional do his searching, rather than rely on what you can do on your own. And as I said, we try to combine the name that our client thinks the subject has with other information that the client is able to give us. We talked about that earlier, phone numbers, email addresses, that kind of thing, and try to match those things up. When our databases are very good at taking different, seemingly unconnected pieces of personal data and trying to figure out which one of those 335 million people in the United States all those things apply to, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like I said, there are a lot of Brad Robinsons in the U.S., but if you had my age range and the fact that I live in West Palm Beach, Florida, and the fact that I drive a Mercedes, our databases are nimble enough to be able to take those four pieces of information and weed out all the other Brad Robinsons that don't fit the other criteria.
This is all terrific information. Thank you. If people want to know more about your services, how can they contact you?
Our website is millenniumgroup2001.com. Millennium spelled with two L's and two N's. So all one word, millenniumgroup2001.com. Our email address is there as well.
Great.
And our phone number is 561-655-2001.
Okay, Brad, is there anything that you'd like to add? Did I forget to ask anything important?
No, I would maybe just add that anybody that calls us and says that they are a friend of Donna at Love Fraud would receive extra special treatment.
I'm Donna Andersen, and this is True Lovefraud Stories. I hope you enjoyed this interview with private investigator Brad Robinson. Remember, If you buy a background check online, there's a good chance that it will be incomplete or inaccurate. If you really need the right information, you may want to retain a professional. True Lovefraud Stories is produced by lovefraud.com. I'm the author of lovefraud.com. Engineering is by Terry Kelly. To learn how to recognize and recover from everyday sociopaths, visit lovefraud.com. And for more information about this story, other great stories, or if you'd like to share your story, visit podcasts.lovefraud.com.